Hey guys, welcome back to What the Fat. Today I have on a very special guest, someone whose story is amazing and super relatable to a lot of people, and something that I think a lot of you will get a lot of value out of. If you haven't heard of her already, you've probably been under a rock because she's all over social media crushing it, and that is Lauren Berryhill, but you probably know her as Keto Coach Lauren. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, of course. I mean, we've met for the first time at Metabolic Health Summit. I feel like I knew you, but I didn't know you. I was like,
Well, it was actually KetoCon. I wish I could have went to Metabolic Health Summit.
KetoCon.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was the Redmond's party.
Yeah, they throw the best parties always.
Yeah, they do.
Always.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But it was so awesome meeting you. When I first started talking to Josh Perry, that's when I started hearing more about who Ryan Lowery was, and now you guys are like the best of buds. So
He's amazing. I love that guy.
Which is crazy. He lives 45 minutes from me, and we had to go all the way to Texas to meet.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Mm-hmm. You guys have to hang out more often now.
Yes, I know. Especially now he's got his cute puppy. So.
I know.
I'm sure y'all have a little bromance over the dog.
We do. We always send him pictures back and forth like, oh, gosh. That's amazing.
Aww, that's awesome.
So tell people a little bit, for those who might not know you, tell them a little bit about your story growing up. Like, you were someone, I think what's the most interesting is that you weren't someone who necessarily struggled with being overweight or obese early on. So can you talk a little bit about that story?
Yeah. So really early on for me, it was more of a mental body image struggle. I didn't struggle with being actually physically overweight. Aside from maybe a little bit heavier than some of the younger girls, but you know how the trends of how you look as a female changed, what the ideal body is. And so over the course of, middle school and high school, I was very hyper aware of my image and how I looked, and just was very always so self-conscious. I hit puberty at a really, really early age, like 9, and so that was very very different. A lot of my friends didn't understand like why I was going through so many changes so early, so that made me really self-conscious, and so from an early age I just had an issue with body image and feeling comfortable in the way that I looked, and I always felt the pressure to watch what I eat, make sure I'm not eating too many calories, making sure that I'm moving a lot. And so it wasn't necessarily about actually having extra weight on my body, but just feeling like I always needed to be on a diet to look the part, to look like a healthy female. But yeah, so I didn't really start struggling with weight until probably towards the end of high school, like when I got into college.
But you had this sort of, throughout all of high school, you had this sort of body dysmorphia where you thought you were overweight, and that kind of led to some of the eating struggles later on. Right? Yeah,
so I suffered with the body dysmorphic disorder for as early as 6th grade. That's what I can remember when it started kind of happening, was when I tried out for cheerleading in 6th grade. I didn't make the actual team. I made manager, and then someone, actually a loved one close to me, made the comment that maybe if I'd have lost 10 pounds, I would have made the team. And so from then, that's the very first moment that I remember like really thinking that weight was what associated like with success and where I could go in life. And so struggled with body image issues, led into a binge eating disorder, led into some anorexia, and really overall an addiction to food.
And was that all throughout college?
That was throughout college. I got married very early. I actually married my high school sweetheart. We took a break while we went to college, and then we ended up getting married. And it's from the time that I went off to college and kind of had my own, could control where my money was going, kind of hide the food that I was eating in excess, and then getting comfortable after getting engaged and getting married, having a baby, all of that. It just kind of tumbled and every year I found myself heavier than I was the year before.
And so when did it kind of click for you? Like, this is something that is probably an issue. Was it something that you knew and you're just like, I can't control this? Like, when did that click for you?
Honestly, I knew the behavior that I was going through, that I was practicing, like, going to fast food restaurants, ordering tons of food and eating it before I even get home, and then eating meals after I'd get home and no one would even know. Like, that behavior, I knew it was wrong. I just didn't want to come to terms with it. And it wasn't until I actually like had my son and realized like what was going on when I got the diagnosis of prediabetes and that my cholesterol was through the roof at the age of 22 that like I needed to make a literal change.
Wow. So you were pregnant at 22 with your son, and at that point, I believe you were what, 230 pounds?
Yeah, 232. Yeah.
And
I'm 5'2", so if you think about 232 pounds on a little tiny short girl, it's a lot.
Right. So that's when like it clicked for you. And during your pregnancy, you had pre-diabetes and high cholesterol?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Gotcha.
that's actually when it intensified. So I never actually suffered with gestational diabetes. I don't know how, but I had preeclampsia, which was horrible. My blood pressure was like sky high. They were terrified they were going to have to induce me for C-section, and they ended up having to induce me because of that issue. But I mean, it was all food related. Like I don't doubt that one bit.
And so when your son was born, after that, when did you really start to make a change? Like, when did you say, you know what, this is it, like, I got to start making this change?
So as a new mom, you're really frazzled, and there's so much that is changing before you that you're just kind of like you don't have much control over what's going on. But it was probably that January after. So he was born in September, and that January kind of when everybody was like, back on the diet train, like trying to lose weight for New Year's resolution. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna commit to making a change. But what didn't happen was actually the change in my diet. I went back to old ways for a full year of just binging and restricting, over-exercising, eating all of the wrong foods. I was a big advocate for if it fits your macros for the longest time, but I was one of those people that would fit in 80% fun foods and 20% like healthy. So it always ended up me being super duper like low calorie, 900 calorie days, then ended up like binge eating on the weekend and really just going back and forth yo-yoing. And then it was January 2017 when I found keto. But prior to that, I literally just had hit my breaking point with body image and my eating disorder. Like out of nowhere, it hit me prior to January that I needed a literal lifestyle change. Like nothing was going to change unless I committed to removing the things that triggered me and removing the foods that I constantly was finding myself binging on.
Now, this is a question I always ask because I'm in the same category. Like there were foods that I used to binge on all the time. What were some of the top foods that you would binge on? Like, all the time. Like
donuts, chocolate chip cookies, sour gummy worms, like all of the sugar filled like crap.
Right. Ugh. Mine was definitely like candy. Like it was everything candy. And so you made the change in January of 2017. Where did you hear about keto? Where did you think like, wait a minute, I was eating donuts and gummy worms, but like now I'm going to go completely to low carb? Where did you hear about that?
So I had done like this quote unquote carb cycling as one of my dieting strategies in the past. But I had never heard about keto. And so I was in a local like Facebook group with a bunch of girls, and we all were like switching between Weight Watchers and calorie counting and if it fits your macros, and someone brought up keto, and I was like, that sounds interesting. Like, low carb, I've done low carb. I feel better when I do low carb, but I had never heard of the high fat aspect of it. And so probably about the beginning of December 2016, I picked up Jimmy Moore's book, Keto Clarity, and dove in and was just mesmerized because it's a book that is put into layman's terms. Like I don't have a medical background, so really being able to understand what the transition is for keto and you know how your body changes fuel sources and stuff, it really clicked with me, and I'm like, okay, I think I could do this. And then not only that, but just knowing that I wasn't allowed to eat those foods that would trigger me, that I would binge on, and it just, I mean, I started January 15th of 2017 and never looked back.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And so how was your start? Like, did it immediately click for you? Did you have like, wow, I went through this keto flu thing. This sucks. I'm going to go back. Or was it like smooth progress? Like, what was that like for you?
Well, so when I started, obviously I did a lot of research. I'm such a research junkie when it comes to, I like to have all my ducks in a row and be perfect, but obviously everyone's not perfect. So I actually started out counting net carbs, which now I count total. I fully believe in total carbs. But I started counting net carbs. I did not prevent keto flu, even though I knew about it, because I was like, I want to know I'm in ketosis. Like, I want to know. I want to feel it. And I felt it. I felt it bad. And so I recovered from that. And I gave it 8 full weeks of literal no like non-keto quote unquote foods. I stuck with my macros, stuck with all things that I knew were allowed. And then I had a mishap where I cheated and kind of had a binge weekend, and so it kind of set me back a little bit. But it was really that first instance where I had that cheat that kind of kicked me back into, no, this is a lifestyle change. You've got, you know, everyone has to learn at some point that they're going to mess up, and that, you know, you can build a better relationship with food. But it kind of kicked me back into like, no, this isn't like, once I saw how bad I felt when I cheated, I think there's really no going back once you feel how amazing being in ketosis is.
That's right. I love that. And I wanna talk a lot about keto, kind of like your keto journey now. But before we jump into that, I wanna say, if you could go back, knowing what you know now at this point, if you could go back and tell 21-year-old Lauren something, what would that be? What would that be? What would you tell her?
I would always say that like fat isn't bad, because I followed low fat diets for so long, and I feel like that was possibly one of the reasons why I have such messed up hormones, because the reason I started my cycle so early was because of all of this low fat. You know, when I knew about dieting from a young age, I was doing like no fat at all, like what supports your hormones when it comes to that as a female so young. So I feel like if I could go back, I would encourage a more fat-based diet also, but like and really just educate myself on the foods that properly fuel me instead of, you know, the fun foods or whatever. So,
and you work with a lot of people now that probably are experiencing, and I know there's a lot of people listening to this that have dealt with or are currently dealing with some form of body dysmorphia where like they're not happy, there's a lot of things going on. How do you approach, and is your approach different for men versus women, because both of them experience this type of thing, or is it kind of the same overarching theme?
It just depends. A lot of times with women, it comes from their body image stems from outside sources like the social, you know, what you see on social media, but a lot of it is internal. You know, I work with a lot of moms that feel like they're not good enough moms because they have to go to work, or they, you know, they just don't feel like they're doing the best for their child, or whatever. A lot of it comes internally for women, and so with overcoming body dysmorphia, it takes a lot of internal healing, looking inward, like healing our the image that we have of ourselves. So like a lot of the negative self-talk. But for men, I find that it's not often talked about. And so I did the talk on body dysmorphia on the low carb cruise, and what was fascinating was that men actually suffer more from body dysmorphia than women. It's just not talked about. And so when I talk to males about it, they're obviously very like they don't want to talk about it, but when you get them to open up, they're just like, Most of them feel like they're not big enough muscular wise, or they look smaller than the people in the gym, or there's a different side of it. So I think a lot of it all relates back to that negative self-talk, and for whatever reason we all just don't want to be kind to ourselves. A lot of the things that we say to ourselves we wouldn't say to someone else, so it's like that relationship, we have to heal it.
I love that. And I love that you bring that up, because you're spot on in that. I think a lot of people, men primarily, but women are afraid to talk about it. And I think we live in such a digital age where people are so obsessed with comparing themselves to, oh, this person's online. And you don't know, like, filters and photos. And it's like, that's not really, like, that's not real. Like, I love the concept of, like, listen, you have to look internally first. Like, stop focusing on the external sources. And I think more than anything, what I've seen over the last probably 4 or 5 years is that this keto community has embraced that due to people like you, like the thought leaders who are out there being like, it's okay, like, be confident in yourself, like, cool, even if, like, stop being like, oh, that person lost 150 pounds. If you lost 80 pounds, cool, that's great, that's amazing. Like, stop comparing yourself. So I love that. That.
And then you also, like, you really just don't know what's fake on social media. So I'm a huge advocate. A lot of people have said you're the girl who shows her loose skin, and I'm like, I'm gonna just keep it real with you, because after 100-pound weight gain, though I wasn't, overweight my entire life, but gaining over 100 pounds, losing it, and then also having a child on top of that, like, you're not going to look picture perfect. And it's very easy to do that on social media, but I will be the first to show, like, there are still things that I have to work through every single day, but it gives people a more realistic view into what is going to happen post weight loss, and to not be ashamed about it.
I love that. And I think that's one of the first things I noticed about how authentic and transparent you are, is just, I think so many people need that in the age where it's so easy to doctor something up. It's like, this is real. This is me. This is what can happen. So I love that. I love that. Huge kudos to you for doing that.
Thank you.
I want to jump in and talk a little bit about keto for you now. So, like, what does you're a pro at this now. You've been doing it for a lot of years. What's a day look like for you, eating wise?
So I'm very, like I said, in tune with hormones, because I was on like hormone like replacement and things like that for a really long time to kind of balance things out. Plus, I was on birth control for a really long time. I naturally regulate now. So for me, I have a very strict schedule that I have found with, like, seed cycling with keto and increasing like leafy greens and things like that throughout certain times in my cycle. So anywhere, and I'm sure women who are listening to this would find it intriguing, but, like, for me, anywhere from day 1 of cycle to day 14 is typically like a strictly lower, like 10 to 15 total carbs, really no veggies or anything like that. Maybe some beef sausage or ground beef, or some good quality meat with eggs and avocado. That's probably about the only green thing you'll see within that first 2 weeks. And then towards the end, when ovulation and things like that occur, I'll do certain seeds, such as like sesame seeds and sunflower seeds, which are known to boost estrogen, and then incorporate a couple extra leafy greens, because I am estrogen dominant, and the fiber in the leafy greens tends to kind of filter out that extra estrogen. So it's taken a lot of work for me to figure this out with my body. A lot of people say that I'm, like, hyper aware of it, but I feel like if I don't know all of these things and how they affect me, then I'm not optimal, and it allows me to help other people kind of optimize their keto journey.
I love that. And I think I heard Rachel Gregory talking about seed cycling as well, and I love it's mind blowing to me, because I never have to deal with these fluctuations throughout the month, but I think that's an important piece that people don't talk about, especially in females, to be like, hey, like I've heard Allie Miller talk before in the past about how she titrates things throughout the month, and I'm always fascinated to hear how different people experiment. And so for you, like you're seeing these changes like within day 1 to 14 and then day 14 through the rest of the month. That's incredible. And so you find it helps balance out your hormones throughout that time period.
Yeah, and
wow.
Keto and specifically, like having a higher fat approach, I'm someone who thrives off of like 77 to 80% fat. That is kind of what my diet is most days. And so people look at me and they're like, you're eating that much fat and you're not fat. And I'm like, that's where we gotta break that stigma that, you know, fat makes you fat. But most of my female clients I find tend to feel better on a higher fat ratio. I think it's so important to get the message out there that obviously keto works for everyone differently, and there's not one way to do it, but specifically for men and women, it's totally different, you know, especially if you're a female that's on some hormone control or things like that, it's going to be totally different. And I think a lot of women feel like they start keto, they don't know all about this, and it's normal not to know, but they don't see it work for them immediately and they feel broken or like it doesn't work, when really there's just a deeper underlying issue that you kind of have to figure it out.
I love that. That's so important. What are your thoughts on, do you do like any intermittent fasting? Like, does that change throughout the month as well? Like,
it does.
Like? Okay.
Yeah. So I typically will do like 16 to 18 hour fast each day, but the week before or the week of ovulation, usually about that 3-day, like the day of and then the day, like 2 days after, I won't do it at all because my hormones are like so much higher, my hunger hormones. And then the week of my actual cycle starting, I don't fast at all because it's such a stressor on my body that I actually see like glucose increase, which is natural for females in their cycle, but it will increase, my stress level will increase, I'll get very like jittery and things like that. So I just don't even worry about fasting. And most days I really just listen to my body, but I mean, you know, it works for people individually. Like I can do extended fasting when I don't plan it, like if I just listen to my body and let it go. But if I try to force a fast, you can forget it. My brain's constantly telling me I need to eat. I'm so hungry, and I'm not.
And I think that's super important because I'm 100% in agreement with you. And I think particularly with people who come from a mentality of like starving and binging, you need to be super in tune with your body, because the minute you try and force something, and then like I was the first time, this is probably 5 years ago, where I was starting to do intermittent fasting, it'd be like, cool, I'm going to fast 24 hours, and then it'd be like I would plan to go to a Brazilian steakhouse like at hour 25 and like,
feast like crazy.
Like, yeah. So it's just like, and it led to this like site, and I was like, you know, I just need to listen. Like if I'm not hungry and I can go, like I'm fine. So
I think that's the hard part about the community in itself. People who are new to it, they see these people fasting and they see us like, you know, people who have been doing it for a long time, like, oh, how are you able to fast for that long? How are you able to? And they start forcing it, and then they end up in that restrict and binge cycle, and it sets off a whole another thing. So that's one of the things that I'm really passionate about, is understanding that, like, you know, your day one is totally different than my day, you know, 700 and whatever. Like it's completely different, and we all start at one point, but we can't really, like you said, compare weight loss, like the way that we do keto, things like that.
I love that. So true. Now, what are some of the things that you do daily to kind of like help? Do you like supplement with electrolytes? Do you use bone broth? What are some of the things that you incorporate in, or is it mainly just like I eat 1 meal a day, 2 meals a day? What's it like?
Yeah, so like I'm a big advocate for we talked about my addiction to like sugar. Like I was a big cookies and donut and everything like that. So in the beginning, when I was counting net carbs, I was still allowing those treats in there, and I found that I would end up binging on those. And so my binge eating from normal standard American diet foods came into keto, and when I realized that, I completely changed my view of like having treats. I'll have the occasional glass of wine or make an occasional cheesecake or whatever. Moderation is key. But I'm someone who is more of an abstainer when it comes to things, and I know what's going to trigger me. So, like, I don't really ever do any keto treats anymore. As far as electrolytes go, I use Redmond's Real Salt because that's essentially all you need. I'll do maybe some Allie Miller. I use a lot of her supplements, like her Relax and Regulate and stuff for magnesium. But I really just try to stick to a whole foods based keto approach. I think there's just too much crap out there, like the processed snacks and stuff, and people really try to kind of keto fat anything when I'm just all about, my Instagram feed is super boring because I'm like posting a boneless burger with cheese 3 days in a row. But I mean, hey, it's easy meal prep and it's what makes me feel good. So, I think we tend to overcomplicate the diet itself, and we just have to get back to eating real whole food.
Exactly right. And so when you're working with people and they're just getting started, do you see more people like are able to meal prep? Do you try and coach them and work with them on like, hey, prep your meals at home? Or do you see a lot of people that are just like, I want to order out and eat out every day? Like, how do you work with them?
It depends on the person. So like if they have a really busy lifestyle, obviously I'll do more of a coaching on how to eat out keto, what really would look like a meal that fits within your means. And then we'll talk about, if they're able to intermittent fast, incorporating that like with travel and things. But as far as like the normal, I just want to lose weight and feel better, it's really for me about getting them to change their mindset, because when I approached everything with that dieting mindset, it's just easier to order out, or it's just easier to do this, it's really about making that lifestyle change and kind of making yourself do things that aren't comfortable. So meal prepping if you're not used to it, or like if you're having to eat out, really being strict and choosing the foods that are going to be better for you, or eating beforehand. It's about meeting people where they are, but also like giving them that push to be better than where they want, where they are right now. And so it's individualized per person.
Love that. And one of the things that I found super liberating, like being in a state of ketosis for years, is like you talked about with your donuts and gummy worms and things like that. For me, it was the candy aisle. But like, do you find, well, not only with yourself but with clients, like a sense of peace where you can go into a grocery store now and you can walk past the aisle and be like, wow, like this is something that I used to be uncontrollable with, and now it's like, it doesn't really faze me.
It's funny you say that. We just went on a family vacation a couple weeks ago to the beach, and a couple of the family members were like, let's go into this bakery. And I used to be a fiend at bakeries. I'm like, give me that homemade donut, give me that, and so I'm like, this is it. It was so freeing walking into that bakery and then being like, well, we have sugar-free this. And I'm like, yeah, but we don't know what that sugar-free, I don't trust you. It might still have flour or whatever, but walking in and them making their choices and me just sitting there with an iced coffee and just hanging, and I'm like, who am I? Like, I can't believe it's me, but it is very, very freeing. And when I have clients say the same thing, like I walked by the break room table that had all of the treats on it that they brought for such and such's birthday, and I didn't eat one. Like, those are huge wins that people don't tend to recognize. They just recognize that number on the scale, and I'm just like, you have to celebrate those victories too.
That's right. Yeah. Those are huge victories.
Mm-hmm.
Huge. Now, when you're working with a lot of your clients and they're coming to you, are most of them coming to you for like, hey, I want to lose fat, I want to like get over this disorder? Do you work with them and see, like, what are some of the other things you see along the journey? Like, are you like, I feel better cognitively, like I'm able to focus, I'm not as cranky of a mom anymore, like I can play with my kids. What are some of the things that you notice?
Yeah. Yeah. So the mental clarity is always like a first. They're like, oh my gosh, I wake up and I'm not groggy. I'm not tired. Like I'm actually ready to go. And my coffee doesn't actually have to be what gets me going. I wake up ready to go. I wake up before my alarm, or people complaining of like their joint pain going away. So, I work with a lot of younger people because I reach the mom groups and things like that. But I have a couple older, folk that tend to suffer from like arthritis and inflammatory things. And after being strict keto for a solid month or two, they're like, I can bend my elbow and it doesn't hurt anymore, or I can walk and my feet don't hurt, or my knees don't hurt. So those are huge wins that people tend to kind of overlook, and just the increased energy, having the energy to instead of coming home and crashing after work, but being able to get in the floor and play with your son, or go outside and throw a football or whatever. There's tons of different things like that I hear, and it makes me so happy.
That's so great. Now, you being a mom, how has this affected your son? Like what are some of the things now? He eats probably more whole foods than most of his friends and kids. Like, how has it affected him?
So it's crazy. So the beginning of we started doing like a lower carb approach with Connor about halfway through last year, and so that was a transition in itself, because he's going to be 4. And so at that time it was kind of like, no, mommy, I'm not going to eat unless it's what I want. And it is what it is. They'll eat when they're hungry, but it was a fight. It was like taking away the goldfish and giving him cheese crisps, instead. And he was like, this isn't goldfish. I know, I'm not stupid, mom. So it was hard at first, but the more diligent we were with it, the more we noticed like a change in his behavior. So like he was calmer. And when I say calm for a 3.5-year-old, that's huge, because they're so full of energy. But like he was eating, higher fat. We kept, like treats around occasionally, like keto treats. So people didn't think he was deprived, because I can't stand that. But he really started loving steak, loving chicken, loving meat. The more we took out of his diet and the more like whole food base we put in, it was insane to see him like craving those things and eating those things. And we're like, this is a kid who is eating a Lunchable every day, and now he's eating a steak for lunch. And it was just mind blowing. But it's funny because he'll point things out and he'll go, Mommy, that's not healthy. We don't eat that anymore. And, I don't want to give my son an eating disorder by saying like, this isn't food that's good for you. Like this is not good, but teaching him and empowering him and knowing that this food's going to fuel you better, instead of using words like that's bad for you.
Love that. I love that.
Yeah. So I think people tend to think that the younger they are, the more they're not going to comprehend. But he's pretty dang smart for a kid that, is only almost 4, and he knows the difference. So
that's adorable. I love that. I love the terminology of like, no, this is going to feel you better. That's the first time I've ever heard that. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Now, with some of the families you work with, I'm sure one of the biggest challenges, like some of the moms, is how do I get my family to buy in, right? So if they're trying to make a change, like my husband is a pain in the you-know-what, like he's not going to eat this, blah, blah, blah. How do you kind of approach them in that regard?
So a lot of times when women come to me, and it's mostly women, I have to really get them to dig deep into why they're doing this. And they have to really, I get them to share their why. Okay, they want to feel better for their kids. They want to feel better for their husbands. And so they have to be the example. They have to lead by example. And so that's another pressure that gets put on them, sadly, as a mom and a wife. But when they start feeling better and seeing results and speaking about it, and their husbands and their kids see the changes, then it just tends to kind of be that domino effect. Speaking from experience, my husband and I went through a really rough time when I first started. He's actually lost over 100 pounds himself.
Amazing.
And yeah, and so when I first started, he was just like, oh, this is just another fad diet. And it's something people don't talk about is when one spouse sees such great success and the changes that they go through, and then they're starting to get more attention, and then they feel like they're falling behind. It's all that uncomfortable stuff, but really it's just about being the example, and then usually it catches on. So it's kind of like the social media, like, you know, you put your story out there and people tend to follow it, and then they start doing it. It's just really about being that example and leading by example.
I love that. That's a great point. And I think that goes for husband, wife. It just gotta, whoever it is, you gotta lead by example.
Yeah.
Now, I want to wrap up talking a little bit about the future, like some of the things that are on the horizon for you. You're doing incredible stuff, working with a bunch of these women, families, everyone, and I love that. And I can't tell you how much the community appreciates everything you do.
Thank you.
But can you tell us, what are some of the things you have, like what are some of the things you're working on for the future? What do you see Keto Coach Lauren doing? Like, how is she going to change even more lives in the world? What are some of the things that are the future holds?
Oh gosh, it's really all about sharing and being authentic to me on the social media platform that I've built. Obviously, I'm only one person, so I can only work so closely with so many people, but hopefully eventually being able to broaden the amount of people that I work with, and that I can kind of, help, and in some way forming a program that's more in depth where I still get to kind of be hands-on. That's a goal. But sharing my story, speaking at different events, like that's a huge thing that I want to accomplish, is being able to kind of get my story and talk about the things that are not comfortable to talk about, like the body dysmorphia and the eating disorders, and how keto helped to kind of heal my eating disorders. But one of the things that I'm super passionate about is obviously the keto and the family and the kids, and empowering your kids to, like, just because they're 8 years old and they've been eating this way for 8 years doesn't mean that you can't change it. It's not going to be easy, but you have to start somewhere. And so I'm currently in the process of writing 2 books. One that is more keto and family, and kind of how to transition your kids in a gentle way, but also like empowering them. And then another is actually on the whole body dysmorphia and eating disorder. So those are 2 huge projects, but yeah.
That's awesome. You'll have to let me know when those are ready to go. I definitely want to check them out.
Yeah.
Last question, because I know you're super, super busy, and I ask this to everyone. It, like, at the end of your journey, when your time's up and you want everyone in the world to know what's your motto, what's your legacy, what did Lauren stand for, what would that be? What would that be for people?
Being comfortable in who you are, and like not feeling the pressure to be what everyone, like, for so long I feel like I had to look like someone else, or had to be like someone else, or had to strive to be like someone else, when really it was just, it's all about being who you are, and like living that and being authentic and being real and just being 100% you. And not everybody's going to like you, but you still have to live life for you. And so I'm big on the whole authenticity, being vulnerable, not being scared to share the darkest and like not so comfortable parts, because I think that's where people tend to grow the most, is when they see other people that have struggled with it and been through it. It's kind of like pulling someone up after you've been, down for a long time. And so just that's kind of where I'm all about, the vulnerability and the passion and the being authentic. So that's hopefully incredible. I'll be remembered for that.
That's incredible. And I guarantee you will. And I think I'd say there's a lot of incredible people in the keto space, a lot of keto influencers. You're not only one of them. I think you're just a great human being. Like I think there's a lot of people who can learn a lot, that if they're listening to this and they're not even keto, it's like, wow, like I can appreciate what she does, and that's incredible.
That means so much. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Last thing, because I hope everyone wants to know more about you and is going to be waiting for those books to come out and everything. Where can people find you? Where can they contact you? Social media, website, anything?
So everything is pretty much Keto Coach Lauren. Website's ketocoachlauren.com. Instagram, I'm at keto_coach_Lauren. That's where I'm most active. I'm literally there every day posting pictures of my dogs and my food and my son. And then I have Facebook, and I also have a YouTube channel, and I have a podcast as well, KCL's Keto Corner. So
love it. Love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I know you're super, super busy, and I hope we get to hang out again. I'll have to come visit you and Josh sometime.
Yes, that would be so fun. But thank you for having me on. This has been awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, guys. Make sure you go check out Lauren. She's doing incredible work every single day. Appreciate you guys, and I'll talk to you soon.